Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to AJAC Live Online. My name is Joel Burney, and it is fantastic to have you with us tonight. I would like to make special mention of our Facebook audience, as well as those who have been able to join us from overseas. Thank you so much for being with us too. A quick flip to Bassem in Israel. How are you?
Hello, how are you? Good evening to everybody.
Great to see you, Bassem. I'm really looking forward to the fantastic presentation that you have for us today. Now, ladies and gentlemen, very, very short housekeeping from me as usual. I can announce that in the last 5 minutes, we have confirmation of our next webinar, which, given the issues that have been going on both domestically and on the war front in Israel, we'll have AJAC specialist Ehud Yari from Jerusalem, who will be joining us on Tuesday, June 8th. So that's next Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. We'll give all the ins and outs of what's going on over there. I'm sure it's going to be a fantastic presentation. An invitation will be in your inbox tomorrow morning. I can assure you. That's Ehud Yari next week, Tuesday, June 8th at 7:30 p.m. Also, just a quick reminder to please have a look at our social networks. AJAC produces a lot of original content. You can follow us on our YouTube, on our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. So if you want some more information about what's going on in Israel and quite some in-depth analysis and copious amounts of original content, please jump on our socials as well as our website at ajac.org.au. As usual, tonight we'll be having a Q&A towards halfway through the webinar. I'll go through the Zoom instructions then. So please have your questions ready for Bassem at that stage. Now, ladies and gentlemen, to the main event tonight. Bassem Eid is a Jerusalem-based political analyst, human rights pioneer, and expert commentator in Arab and Palestinian affairs. Eid was born in Jordanian-occupied Old City in East Jerusalem. In 1996, he founded the Jerusalem-based Palestinian Human Rights Monitoring Group. In 2016, Eid assumed the role of chairman of the Center for Near East Policy Research. Bassem Eid has spent 26 years researching UNRWA policies and has written extensively on the subject of UNRWA reform. He's also an outspoken critic of the boycott, divestment, and sanction movement, otherwise known as BDS. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's topic is a Palestinian case against Hamas. It is now my pleasure to hand over AJAC's Executive Director, Dr. Colin Rubenstein, to say a few words.
Thanks very much, Joel, and welcome everybody to this special event this evening with our very perceptive commentator, analyst, human rights pioneer, Bassem Eid, a good friend who was AJAC's guest in Australia in 2016. Too long ago. We need to see you here again, Bassem, very soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very soon, I hope. Now, here's the thing. Bassem Eid knows what's going on in Arab and Palestinian affairs, especially the lead up to what happened over the last month in the recent Israel-Hamas Palestinian Authority mini-war. He's got many ideas on what caused this, on what happened during it, and very importantly, where to now. And we have the ceasefire with Hamas. What are the dimensions of that? Is it holding? What's been the role of outside actors? Iran, of course, most obviously. What have been the regional implications for Israel's relations with its Arab neighbors, for example? Really, what is the impact of what's going on domestically in Israel in terms of the formation of a new government? Are we seeing the end of the Netanyahu era? Now, it's clearly, it's still too early to tell, and it's a week at least before a new government can be sworn in. But it does look as though the Lapid-Bennett team, together with 5 other parties, and very significantly, possibly including the Ram party under Mansour Abbas, will actually oust Bibi, who's been the longest serving Israeli prime minister with a remarkable record, although with some shadows growing over that record, as we all know, in recent times. So it's a very confused and complicated situation, and hearing Bassem's views on that, and particularly on Israeli Jewish and Arab relations within Israel, is going to be well worth listening to. and any advice he might have for the next Israeli government, whatever it is. Now, Bassem, just to conclude, is really very outspoken about the disinformation coming from Hamas and about Hamas and Palestinian affairs. He's clear about the damaging role it's played and is still playing in Palestinian life. And I think it's fair to say that he's referred to it as an authoritarian military junta, even a criminal gang. And Palestinian lives will only improve when the Hamas reign of terror, is over. And read his letter to his Palestinian friends in the current Australian Israel review, if you doubt what I'm saying is accurate. It needs to be read not just by you, it actually needs to be read by those many journalists, politicians, think tankers and others in Australia who've been spouting the most disgraceful distortions and myths and representations of Israel and of the situation overall in terms of what's transpired over the last month. And we'd like to hear much more of Bassem Eid on Australian radio and watch him on Australian TV. And this is an open invitation to any of those journalists who are watching. I'm sure Bassem is available for comment. Bassem, we're waiting to hear what you've got to tell us. The screen is yours. A great welcome to you, my friend. Thank you very much for being with us this evening.
Thank you so much, Colin. It's a pleasure to have such kind of conversation with Ajak. And as you mentioned, a lot of misinformation has been going around those 11 days on what's happened between Israel and Hamas. Unfortunately, looks like that the international community didn't learn the lesson yet. The international community right now is talking much more about the reconstruction of Gaza rather than talking about the ceasefire itself. And here is again and again, we are falling in the same gap. We will reconstruct Gaza, but after 3, 4, 5 years, another round of fighting will take place. And what we reconstructed almost today, it will be destroyed in the coming 5 years. So what is the international community really waiting for? Did the international community using the Palestinians? I didn't see that the international community are really trying to save or to help the Palestinians. But I believe that they are using us for their own political agenda. I must have to tell you that during the war, I made so many telephone calls with my friends in Gaza. And the first question that I asked them, what you are waiting for? Then people said, we are waiting till Israel will bring a change in Gaza. I said, which change you expect from Israel in Gaza? They said, we want to get rid from Hamas via Israel. And that will be the biggest change. Then I asked them, Israel will never make change in Gaza. The only one who can make change in Gaza is yourselves, the Gazan people. What about the Gazan Spring against the Hamas? Then everybody start laughing by saying, Bassem, listen, if the Iranian Spring succeed, then the Gazan Spring will succeed. So that means that people almost feeling that they are hostages under the Hamas. They are very poor under the Hamas. And in the meantime, they are really hopeless. That's one of the major problems of the Gaza Strip. Nobody tried to enter to the Gaza Strip and to conduct a survey among the 2 million civilians who are living there, what exactly their needs. No one want to do that. And they just give the Hamas the opportunity to direct the media, the international media over there, and the international media only reporting what Hamas is really demanding from them. There is a huge censorship, a huge restrictions on the foreign media inside the Gaza Strip. I wrote a piece for a website in the UK called Spectator. And the title of that piece, not Israel, Hamas should have to be blamed on that catastrophe. Everybody knows that while Israel celebrating the Yom Yerushalayim on the 12th of May, Hamas shot 6 rockets towards Jerusalem. And Israel just react. Israel never start any kind of war, any kind of shooting towards Gaza. Israel just react. And Hamas, in the meantime, while they shot the 6 rockets, they want to defend 7 houses in Sheikh Jarrah, which is, by the way, the Sheikh Jarrah story is completely out of that issue. But Hamas tried to climb on it politically by using Sheikh Jarrah and using the Al-Aqsa Mosque. No more and no less. Now, Hamas shot 6 rockets. Hamas shot 6 rockets to protect 7 houses in Sheikh Jarrah. But in the meantime, Hamas allowed Israel to destroy over than 1,500 houses in the Gaza Strip. So where is the victory here? Where is the victory that the Hamas is really celebrating in the Gaza Strip? I want to see the Hamas victory on electricity. I want to see Hamas victory on the water. I want to see the Hamas victory on the sewage, on the power. This is the victory that I might admit it as a real victory for the Hamas. Friends, the Hamas leaders, after the ceasefire took place, they gave a lot of statements and announcements, among them that Israel has no right to exist, which means that this ceasefire is just temporary. Everybody knows that it is temporary. Israel knows that it is temporary. Egypt knows that it is temporary. And the question, how we can reach something permanent here? I think that this is the real work of Israel right now. Much more than Egypt, much more than the international community. Israel should have to be very tough towards any rocket might be shot from the Gaza Strip. Hamas should have to understand that the coming reaction will be the end of the Hamas authority in the Gaza Strip. I think that only Israel who can avoid Hamas from shooting rockets, not anybody else around the world. And I hope that the new government is going really to discuss it very detailed and to find ways how we can going to keep this ceasefire for long time. In my opinion, the Hamas are using their own people. The Hamas are sacrificing their own people. We saw recently how the Hamas leaders hiding themselves in the tunnels. They have shelters to protect themselves, but the other 2 million civilians, they have no shelters. They have no electricity. They have no water, and Hamas is not care about his people. Hamas is much more care about their own political agenda, how to gain power and how to gain richness. And Hamas should have to understand that restlessness will be a very high price. They must have to pay a very high price. while sacrificing 2 million people. I think that this leadership must have to be ended as soon as possible. And the international community should have to participate by ending the Hamas authority inside the Gaza Strip. In my opinion, the Palestinian Authority in the meantime is very weak. They couldn't do anything after such kind of ceasefire. They couldn't provide anything to the Gaza Strip. But in the meantime, the Palestinian Authority right now is fighting that any reconstruction plan in Gaza should have to go through the legal representatives of the Palestinian people, which is the Palestinian Authority and the PLO, which means that the PA and the PLO preparing their pockets to get a lot of millions of dollars. And we know that within a week or 2 weeks, some donors will meet in Egypt. Some donors will donate probably hundreds of millions of dollars for the reconstruction. Probably a couple of hundreds of millions will be received and will be stolen, and then everybody will be ready for the next round. Friends, the houses which has been demolished in Gaza during the 2014 war, still people asking to reconstruct these houses. In 2014, what about today? Till when we are going really to be patient here? Why the Gazan people are so patient here? Why the international community is so patient here? Why everybody want to use the Palestinians rather than helping the Palestinians or to provide any kind of help to the Palestinians? I think that we are in a very big trouble right now. And if such kind of things will continue, forget anything about peace between Palestinians and Israelis, and even forget anything called two-state solution for two people. In my opinion, the Palestinian leadership are completely against the two-state solution. The Palestinian leadership demanding a three-state solution for two people, because the Palestinians want their own two states. The Hamas running their own Islamic Emirate in the Gaza Strip, and Abbas is running his own empire in the West Bank and the state of Israel. This is how we are living since Abbas was elected as a president in 2005. Nothing changed. We almost stuck with this president in the past 16 years. And I think what the Hamas propose or what the Hamas plan to achieve in the elections, after Abbas canceled those elections, Hamas tried to achieve it by fighting Israel. So the cancellation of the elections, of the Palestinian elections, also play a very important role here in this fight. And I think that the international community should have to punish Abbas on canceling these elections. Friends, I want to tell you just in brief about the Sheikh Jarrah. Sheikh Jarrah is considered as a refugee camp, by the way. The houses belong to the Jews. And those Jews who left their houses during the war, 1948, these houses remain empty until UNRWA, the United Nations, took those places and they put inside some Palestinians who escaped from their villages around Jerusalem. Since the Jews left their houses, UNRWA never ever tried to register these houses neither on the name of UNRWA nor on the name of the people who settled over there. And it remains until today registered on behalf of the Jewish people. So it probably might be the big mistake of UNRWA. Maybe big mistake of the Jordanian government in that time. So this is the whole issue. So these Jewish people came today by saying, listen, here are the documents. Even the Jewish people succeed to bring more documents from Turkey, by the way, to prove their ownership of those houses. Now the issue in front of the court. So it is a legal issue rather than it is a political issue. Why the Hamas is trying to climb on it politically? And in Jerusalem, during the war, we found that the Fatah and the Hamas has a kind of a competition between themselves who is going to escalate the situation more and more in Jerusalem. That's really very scared. I must have to tell you that if Hamas succeed in anything in the past 11 fighting days, they succeed in one thing, that they succeed to destroy the coexistence between the Israeli Arabs and the Jewish people in the joint cities inside Israel. You know, the coexistence between the Jews and the Israeli Arabs almost took 73 years to build it. And Hamas succeed within 11 days to destroy it. Something broken in that coexistence. And I believe that to repair that thing, it is not going to be in one day, and it is not going to be in 1 year. I think that it is the time right now for the leaders from the both sides, Jews, Muslims, and Christians, to stand up and to try to start building this coexistence, which has broken by a third party, which is the Hamas, not broken by the Israeli Arabs or the Jews. I think that the Jews and the Israeli Arabs should have to start realizing that this is our country and we have no other place to live. We should have to live together in peace, in security, in coexistence, in a kind of the best relationship that it could be. Listen, neighbors beating their neighbors. Neighbors stab their neighbors. Synagogues has been burned. Why that? By burning a synagogue, will that solve the Middle East problem? By demonstrating in Washington, D.C., is that going to solve the Middle East problems? What we are doing, I think that the Jews and the Arabs should have to wake up here in Israel. Because if there is anyone who can solve the Middle East problems, will be only the Jews and the Arabs. No other third party can do so. So I am feeling so sorry on what's really happened. It was a very scared situation that I never remember it since 1967. But I hope that as soon as possible, calmness will come back to its place. Coexistence will come back to its place, and let us look more and more for the economic prosperity. If not for ourselves, let us look for it for our own children. I probably will stop here and give you some time for some questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bassem. Wow. Thank you so much for that. That was fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, now's the time for question and answers. You'll see the reaction button at the bottom of your Zoom page. where you can hit that and use the raise hand feature inside Zoom. That will provide me with a silent notification of your desire to ask that question. What we'll also do is that if you are a little bit camera shy and you would like to write your question in the chat, you can do so as well. For the first question tonight, I'll flip to Dr. Zvi Fleischer.
Hi, Bassem. Wonderful to hear from you. Since it's very up to the news, I want to ask about the Ram party and the new Israeli government. Do you think that if the Ram party indeed becomes part of this government with Mansour Abbas, that will help to solve the problems between Israelis and Arabs? And if so, what can they do? Or do you have a different view?
See, I think that Mansour Abbas is probably one of the most, let's say, courageous Israeli Arab leader in Israel. I remember during the war, Mansour Abbas went to the Arab follow-up committee and he talked there during the war, listen, and he talked there that what's going is horrible and unbelievable. And we are the leaders of the Israeli Arab community should have to stand up immediately to start shouting in the roads, in the streets, in the villages, in the towns, how to calm people. Unfortunately, the Arab follow-up committee rejected the demand of Mansour Abbas. I am very sorry to tell that. They rejected the demand because there are some Israeli Arab members of Knesset who are benefiting a power and money from such kind of horrible situation. Why to reject it? I think that Mansour Abbas is a real leader. I don't know him personally. I never met with him, but I am following his news, and I think that he is one of the people who might be in the good place to bring and to rebuild and to reconstruct the coexistence between the Jews and the Israeli Arabs.
Thank you, Bassem. I'll now hand over to Jeremy Samuel.
Thank you very much, Joel, and Bassem. What an honor to meet you, and thank you for your amazing presentation. My question is probably a hard one, but I'm sitting here. I think this is the 5th or 6th or maybe the 42nd or 128th time we've gone through this cycle since Israel withdrew from Gaza. And the narrative every time is kind of the same, and yet the left and the Palestinians get more virulent, more anti-Semitic, and more blinded by the fact that they're supporting in a group by supporting Hamas, they're supporting a group that murders gay people, kills freedom of speech, has no tolerance for dissent, all of this stuff. And yet I'm just completely frustrated because I feel, like I said, like we've been through this same cycle 130 times. We hear a few sane, sensible voices like yourself speaking, frankly, in our own echo chamber. And so I'm sorry, that's more of a speech than a question. So my question is this: in the context of this and everything you have said, how do we interrupt this pattern? How do we get a clearer message out that the Western media and all these crazy voices must take notice of?
I agree with you. Unfortunately, there are so many organizations these days around the world who are benefiting from the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This is one of the major problems of the conflict itself, that we have so many fingers are playing in this conflict. When I look to those people around the world demonstrating, burning the Israeli flag and the American flag, calling to kill Jews, calling to destroy Israel, I am looking to myself in the mirror and I said, what shit things these people are doing? How what they are doing can help me? It never ever helped me at all. And I think that these people outside are causing a huge damage to the reputation of the Palestinians and the Jewish people inside Israel. The question is, who is that one who is sponsoring and giving money to those organizations? What is the purpose by giving money to such anti-Semitic organizations? So, my friend, I used to say many years ago that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict like ATM. You can withdraw money whenever you want. It's a financial issue. It's an income issue for those thugs and for those thugs and scandals who are running around the world calling to destroy Israel. I don't think that I am, as a Palestinian, will benefit from destroying Israel. And the question, how many hundreds of years will take you to destroy Israel? I might don't have enough time to wait for that. That's the big question. That politically, so many parties are playing in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And unfortunately, looks like that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is completely out of the hands of the Palestinians and the Israelis. So I can do nothing towards that. And you are going to see those pictures again and again, probably in the coming 50 years.
Thank you, Bassem. I'll now hand over to Ajax Jamie Himes.
Thank you very much, Joel. Thanks, Bassem. We've been hearing a lot lately, as we do with every conflict, how Israel is an apartheid colonialist enterprise. I'm just wondering how you respond to those slurs.
See, I visited South Africa for 4 times. 2 times I was at the Apartheid Museum in Johannesburg. And those who are saying that Israel is an apartheid, I think that these people never ever visited Israel, by the way. I don't know how these people reach the conclusion that Israel is an apartheid. Probably they are reading the New York Times. And I must have to tell you that media almost lost the ethics of journalism. There is no more ethics of journalism. And media trying to mislead their leaders rather than to provide information. And sometimes when I'm hearing, mostly I am hearing this word apartheid outside Israel, not inside Israel, by the way. Then I ask people, have you visited Israel? No, we haven't. You should have. You should have. You should have to come and to see what is going on. The apartheid is a completely different story than the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I am saying all the time, while the resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is the 2-state solution, which is still on the table, I will never ever consider Israel as an apartheid. We still have a solution here. And everybody calling for that solution. Even Israelis, Palestinians, international community. Even Biden repeated, recently during the war. So while we have still a kind of a solution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I don't ever believe that Israel is an apartheid.
Thank you, Bassem. I'll now hand over to Ajax Oved Lobel.
Hi, Bassem. Thanks for doing this.
Hi. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you your view of the Palestinian Authority's role in all of this. We know that Donald Trump's administration essentially sidelined the Palestinian Authority, and Biden has now reversed that decision. Do you think they have any role to play in any of this? And just it's not really a related question, but one of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad officials said that almost every house in Gaza has a picture of Qasem Soleimani in it. Do you have any visibility of whether that's true, that Gazans support Qasem Soleimani?
Unfortunately, I couldn't say that every house, but you should have to know a very important thing, that Iran itself is behind the Islamic Jihad and the Hamas. Iran is spending millions of dollars every month on the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad activities. The Iranians announced just a few days ago that there are 3 factories making rockets under the ground in the tunnels. Iran said that. Now the question, how the money reach Gaza from Iran? I can understand the money which is coming from Qatar to Hamas, that's coming via Israel. Everybody knows that. But the money which is coming from Iran to the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, in which tunnels? Through which banks? That's a very important question. I believe that there are Iranian engineers inside Gaza who are making these rockets, by the way. And I think that the people in Gaza almost living under a dictatorship authority. Sometimes people should have to hang in their houses the picture of Qasem Soleimani in terms to get $50 at the end of the month from the Hamas or the Islamic Jihad. You couldn't believe. Some people told me that Hamas is bringing people from Gaza to dig the tunnels. 10 hours work in 10 shekels, which means in $3. Imagine for 10 hours to dig tunnels for $3. That's one of the major problems here. You know, I have a friend who is living in the north of Gaza in Beit Hanun. He called me 3 years ago, and he said, Bassem, listen, some people from the Hamas came to me and they told me that they are going to dig a tunnel under my house, but they are going to pay me $50 a month. I said, and what was your answer to them? He said, my answer to them, why to dig only 1 tunnel? Please dig 4 tunnels and give me $200 in a month. That's showing you how the Hamas are really not only using their people, but they are sacrificing them. So of course, if the Hamas start distributing the pictures of Qasem Soleimani by saying everyone will hang it in his house, will get a $10 a month, I think that all of Gaza will do it, because everybody in Gaza really need the $10, which is the $10, it's a box of cigarette, by the way, here in Israel. It's a box of cigarette here in Israel. So I don't know exactly where we are going. I think that we, the Palestinians, almost stuck somewhere, and we need somebody to lead us. When it comes to the Palestinian Authority, and when it comes to Trump, when he stopped the finance and the support on the Palestinian, Donald Trump knows that the Palestinian Authority is corrupt. Donald Trump knows that the UNRWA is corrupt. Donald Trump knows that the UN is corrupt. Why to give them money? This money is going to the pockets. It's not going to the people by themselves. And the Palestinian Authority is among them. The Palestinian Authority is among them. Now Biden wants again to finance the Palestinian Authority. I said it in many times. If you want to finance the Palestinian Authority, this finance or financial support should have to be conditioned. Should have to be conditioned. You couldn't send to the Palestinian Authority every year $360 million, man. Man, that's a huge money. What really the Palestinian Authority is doing with that? What the Palestinian Authority is really doing with that? I don't think that any Palestinian benefit, even $1 from such a huge amount of $360 million a year. I hope that the Biden administration at least will make a kind of accountability with the Palestinian Authority after each financial support that they are planning to donate to the Palestinian people.
Thank you, Bassem. I'll now hand over to Jack Rubin.
Thank you. And thank you, Bassem.
Thank you.
I think you're incredibly brave for speaking out the way you do. And I was the one that was chatting with you on LinkedIn this morning.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing with us. I have two questions. One is, if death is a currency which the Hamas can use as a propaganda, and reconstruction is a currency which they use to get international support, then what is the real deterrent that Israel can use in order to show force and to stop Hamas from shooting and causing terror again?
Yeah, in my opinion, Israel, first of all, should not allow to the Hamas to control the reconstruction in Gaza or to be involved in the reconstruction. Because we know from the last many rounds that the Hamas using the financial support for the reconstruction of Gaza, they are using it for building their tunnels and military capability. And here, Israel should have to stand up. Israel shouldn't have. Now, Israel, you know, the head of the intelligence of Egypt was in Israel yesterday and the day before. And Israel suggested that an Egyptian committee should be established to take over the whole issue of the reconstruction in the Gaza Strip. You know, Israel has a huge security cooperation with Egypt. And Israel trusts the Egyptian president. So Israel said, we need an Egyptian committee to take over the whole issue of the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip. The Hamas rejected. The Hamas said, I want to be involved in the reconstruction. Because you know, Hamas lost a lot of military equipment and over half of their tunnels almost destroyed. So they want to reconstruct themselves before they are reconstructing the public facilities and the houses which has been destroyed. Now, on the other side, the Palestinian Authority also get into that road, and the Palestinian Authority said any kind of reconstruction in Gaza should have to go through us. So already we have a big fight right now. Who is going to reconstruct Gaza? Even before the donors announced on any donation for the reconstruction, we already start fighting on the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip, while we have zero budget for it. Zero budget for it. I think that Israel should be aware this time. You know, I used to say that Israel made two big mistakes in the history of the state of Israel since 1948. The first big mistake was when Menachem Begin signed the peace agreement with Anwar Sadat in 1977. The mistake was from Menachem Begin that he should have to come to Anwar Sadat by saying, Mr. President, if you will take Gaza back, I will sign the peace accord. But if you are going to leave for us Gaza, no peace between me and you. That's the first mistake. The second mistake made by Ariel Sharon when he decided in August 2005 to disengage from the Gaza Strip. That was also another historical mistake. You know, Ariel Sharon refused to coordinate the disengagement with the Palestinian Authority in that time. He just woke up in the morning saying to the army, go and evacuate all the settlers outside. That's it. And leave Gaza. This is how Ariel Sharon left Gaza for the Hamas, let me say. Because 1 year after the disengagement, the Hamas took over the Gaza Strip. If Israel is still there, Hamas will never, ever take over the Gaza Strip. Hamas will never, ever succeed to shoot rockets towards Israel. So I hope that Israel already understand and learn from those big historical mistakes. And right now to stand very, very strong, mainly in front of the international community. Mainly in front of the international community by saying, no reconstruction in Gaza until the Hamas will destroy his military equipment. I think that this is the way how Israel should have to do it.
Wow, thank you again for a fantastic answer, Bassem. I'll now hand over to Kyle Orton.
Good evening, thanks for your talk. I wanted to ask why this round had provoked Arab-Jewish troubles inside Israel when others hadn't, or at least not for a long time.
Yeah, unfortunately, these people has been incited. These people has been incited. We saw, you know, the head of the political office of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, in a very huge demonstration in Doha, in Qatar. And the first thing he said, that Hamas succeed to destroy the coexistence which took Israel 73 years to build it. He said that. Unfortunately, it's a kind of incitement. And it's a kind of hatred that the Hamas starts breeding in those, you know, joint cities inside Israel. Don't forget that also we have inside Israel some Islamic movements, and those people also involved in such kind of incitement and hatred. And this is how everything start flaming. When things start flaming, then the Hamas and the other Islamic organizations in Israel, they start adding oil to the flame. They start adding oil to the flame, and this is how everything almost broken inside Israel. You know, it was so scary inside Israel. You couldn't go at night. You couldn't leave your house during the day or during the night. You might get a knife. You might get a Molotov in your house. You couldn't believe. The streets were completely empty. Looks like a curfew. It wasn't like that during the Corona pandemic, by the way. You know, sometimes I said, Corona pandemic left us so early. I wish it was remain here in Israel. Then we might avoid all of these casualties and the people who killed and the houses which has been demolished. We were, during the Corona pandemic, we were so scared. We were so afraid. We were so united. Everyone scared, afraid on his neighbor. You couldn't believe which kind of unity we have here in Israel during the Corona pandemic. So what's happened? Everything upside down. But in the meantime, I must have to say, not all of the Israeli Arabs were participated. Not all of the Israeli Arabs are agree with what's happened in Israel. We are talking about a couple of thousands, which in my opinion, those couple of thousands are criminals rather than anything else. So we saw during those riots and demonstrations, just hundreds. We didn't see thousands. We didn't see tens of thousands because people completely against. But in the meantime, people are so scared to stand up and to speak loudly that we are against the violence. That was the problem. So this is unfortunately what the Hamas succeed on, to destroy the coexistence inside Israel.
Thank you, Bassem. I'll now hand over to Ajax Sharon Middleman.
Thanks, Bassem. How do Palestinians feel about the cancellation of the elections? And do you think the PA was worried that Hamas would be too successful in the elections? And now after this conflict, do you think Hamas is even more popular in the West Bank?
See, when I heard about the announcement of the elections by President Abbas, I never ever believed him. And a lot of journalists used to call me and they said, forget, no elections will take place. Because Abbas already put in front of his eyes that there is a pressure from the Egyptians and the Jordanians not to make the elections. But he couldn't come and say that I am canceling the elections because the pressure from Egypt and Jordan. He should have to find between the lines a good excuse to cancel the elections. So what was the excellent excuse that he chose? That if Israel will not allow the Palestinians in East Jerusalem to participate in the Palestinian elections, I am going to cancel it. And it was already canceled. It's already canceled before his announcement. We told everybody, Israel is not going to allow. In the meantime, I want to tell you some very shocked statistics. In 2005, in 2006, when we went to the elections for the Palestinian parliament, do you know how many Palestinians in East Jerusalem participated in those elections in that time? 2,000 people out of 100,000. 2,000. How you can cancel elections because of 2,000 voters? How you can? Where is the international community here to be involved? Why the international community not trying to put pressure on him to make elections every 4 years according to the Palestinian basic law? Where is the internet? Where is the democracy of Europe? Where is the human rights of Europe? Looks like that nobody is really care. Nobody is really care. Now, on the other side, I am quite sure if the elections will take place, I don't believe that the Hamas will win it in the West Bank. You know why? Because the existence of Israel in the West Bank. Israel still exists in the West Bank. And while Israel exists in the West Bank, there is no existence of the Hamas at all. So it is just, you know, sometimes another excuse that if we will make the elections, probably will won by the Hamas. But this is also another excuse. I don't think that the Palestinian president interesting in any kind of elections. This guy already want to keep the current situation as a status quo. As a status quo. He don't want to move forward. He don't want to move backward. He already stuck here. He probably have another 4, 6 years. Then he will pass away. Then he is not care what will happen after him when he passed away. He's not care. He just wait for himself. And he is not care what will happen to the Palestinians in the coming 10 or 15 years, unfortunately.
Thank you, Bassem. I believe that the next question will be from Ida Lichter.
Thank you very much indeed. You mentioned about the incitement of Hamas during the Gaza conflict. What can be done to prevent such provocation in the future, not only at a time of conflict, but during peacetime as well?
I think that that's need a lot of awareness among the people themselves. And let me here talk much more about the Israeli Arabs rather than any other people. I think that the Israeli Arabs should have to understand that the level of life that they have in Israel, no Palestinian have it under any other Arab country around the world. These people are living in a pleasure, a very high level of life. I think that the majority of the Israeli Arabs knows that very well. And this is why just a little people who just moved towards the incitement and towards the hatred. We need a lot of awareness from the leaders, members of Knesset, religious leaders from the both sides, Jewish people and Israeli Arab people. Joint meetings. The government of Israel should have also to open its eyes more and more towards the demands of the Israeli Arabs. I just heard, you know, recently that the unemployment among the Israeli Arab youth is around 40%. That's huge. So people has nothing to do. They have enough time to fight and to hate and to practice violence. I think that the government should have to focus on these issues and to try to find ways how we can guarantee more and more jobs for the Israeli Arab youths. That's really very important. I believe that that's probably will solve half of the problems of the Israeli Arabs. Listen, everybody is seeking an economic prosperity. But while you don't have a job, how you can achieve is such kind of an economic prosperity? And that's exactly the main job of the Israeli government. I wish that the new government will start looking to the whole internal issues inside Israel, to solve those internal issues before we start looking for any other external issues.
Thank you, Bassem. Now for the penultimate question, before I hand over to Jeremy Jones to ask the final question, I'll hand over to Anthony Cohen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bassem, for your integrity and foresight.
Thank you.
The question I ask is, you mentioned obliquely about leadership playing a role. Is there any movement anywhere in either the Arab or Western world of the mullahs in the mosques that are pushing a peaceful coexistence with the Jewish state of Israel?
You know, unfortunately, the Arabs and the Muslims almost separated to too much Muslim movements. You know, sometimes it looks like to me that the Islam in Saudi Arabia is different than it is in Qatar. That the Islam in Syria is different than the Islam in Egypt. That the Islam in Iraq is different than the Islam in Iran. That's a real problem. I think that the Islam is one religion, and the Muslims, all the Muslims around the world are one nation. So why is such kind of differences here between the Islam? You know, I used to lecture for some Muslim leaders in Indonesia, in Asia. Very beautiful people, very beautiful people. They want peace for everybody on earth, including Israel, including Israel. But what I am hearing from the Muslim leaders in Indonesia, I am not listening, I am not hearing it from the Muslim leaders in Egypt, as an example, or in Jordan, or in Saudi. So what is the difference here? Why it is so different? It's different because some of the Muslim leaders trying to politicize Islam and to make their own Islamic analysis here. While you know the big Muslim leader in Egypt, 2 days ago, you know what he said? He said that the walling wall that Israel claiming, it's a big lie. There is no walling wall at all. And he is the big chief of rabbis for Islam in the world, in Egypt. He said that the walling wall is a lie. There is no walling wall. It's an Islam cleansing, he said. It's not for the Jews at all. Listen, when you are hearing such kind of a religious man saying that, which emotion those Muslim youths can get from such kind of statement? This is the problem. And the major problem is that the leaders are sleeping, keeping their nap. They don't want to be involved in any religious issues. And that's one of the biggest problems, because all of those Arab leaders would like to continue corrupting these people, their own people. And they are not care what those religious leaders are saying, how they are inciting, and how they are creating hatred between the Jews and the Muslims. I didn't see, unfortunately, any Islamic party or any Islamic movement who is calling, to live with coexistence with the Jewish people, unfortunately.
Thank you, Bassem. I have a quick note to before we head to Jeremy. I'm going to hand over to Colin for a quick question.
Please.
Bassem, thanks very much indeed for an outstanding presentation. Two
Thank
quick
you.
ones, but they're big questions. you know all about UNRWA, the promise of UNRWA and the performance, which has been so disappointing. It's really part of the problem rather than part of the resolution of the problem. Tell us a little about that, but also what changes you think to be made to UNRWA, which will be a recipient of a lot of this aid money, but it can be misused. And the other, just the second question is also a big one. The countries that are part of the Abraham Accords with Israel, how have they reacted to this? Has it been damaged, or do you think the Abraham Accord, you know, this historic change of normalization between Israel and Arab countries, will survive and can potentially even be strengthened? And what role can those countries play going forward?
Let me start from the second question. I think that Father Abraham is much bigger to be damaged. And I believe that while they call it Abraham's Accords, I think that it's a blessing from Abraham to those accords. So those accords are still exist. I am very happy to say how much I felt so happy when I heard about those accords. I think that is such kind of accords, it probably will be very helpful in the future to achieve a kind of a solution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In the meantime, we are talking about, when we talk about Abraham's Accords, we talk about a very rich two countries, which is the Kingdom of Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates. I think that that's also will contribute a lot to the Israeli and the Palestinian internal economy. So I think that those accords will exist forever because we have the stamp of Abraham on these accords. I think that the United Arab Emirates announced recently that they want to contribute in the reconstruction of Gaza, but not via the Hamas. They already announced that, not via the Hamas. They can do it via the Palestinian Authority, they can do it via the Egyptian, but they already declared they are not going to do it via the Hamas. And that's really very appreciated from the United Arab Emirates. Now towards UNRWA. Colin, listen, I grown up in a refugee camp for 33 years. I still have 6 brothers who are living in that refugee camp in the north of Jerusalem. And every month I have to go there and to visit them. I think that we are, the Palestinian refugees, also became hostages for UNRWA. I must have to tell you that 60% of the budget of UNRWA is going for salary. And only 40% of that budget is going on some benefits to the Palestinian refugees. I don't know till when the international community will continue supporting UNRWA. I heard President Biden also that he is going to contribute a couple of hundreds of millions to the Palestinians via UNRWA. Via UNRWA. I don't think that UNRWA is playing a very important role here. I think that UNRWA right now is trying to defend their own income and their own benefits by inciting the Palestinian refugees against the Israelis. If you will look to their curriculum, in the school curriculum, it's horrible. It's horrible. It's really horrible. And I think that the EU recently criticized UNRWA on their own education curriculum in the schools. Recently, which is the EU knows 30 years ago that UNRWA curriculum is inciting against the Jews. They know. But how the EU recently put a statement by saying that UNRWA curriculum inciting, That's really very strange in my eyes. Very strange. Why the EU doing it? Now, while you said the EU said that UNRWA curriculum is inciting, which measures the EU, is going to take against UNRWA? Don't forget that most of the UNRWA budget is coming from Europe, by the way. Which measures right now the EU is planning to take against UNRWA while they confirm the incitement in their own curriculum? I have no idea, but I think that the Americans should have also to look very carefully into the curriculum of UNRWA. I think that there is a huge material translated in English. So Mr. President Biden advisors have no problem, to put some of those materials and just to read it. They don't have to spend money on translating it. It's already translated. And I think that they must have to recondition, let's say, any kind of money that the American administration is going to donate to UNRWA.
Thank you, Bassem. Now I'll hand over to Jeremy for the final question.
Thank you very much, Bassem. You've said a great deal tonight, which we very much appreciated. Australian policymakers, our government and others, want to do something to help. They're receiving a great deal of pressure to do something, to react in a moral, appropriate way. What advice would you give to the Australian government and others in Australia who genuinely want to make a contribution to making sure what we've just seen doesn't happen again in the future?
Jeremy, I think a country like Australia, also which is, a donor for UNRWA, by the way, I think that Australia much have to focus on the civil projects rather than any kind of political projects. I think that Australia has a representative here in Ramallah, and I think that the representative knows very well what is the ordinary Palestinian people really need. I think that Australia can donate more and more to the Palestinian economy. And that's exactly what the Palestinians really need. I think Australia also should have to participate in the reconstruction of Gaza, but not via the Hamas at all. Not via the Hamas. And the participation of Australia, in my opinion, should have to be how we can contribute more and more to the economy. Listen, we have in Gaza something like 67% unemployment. 67 unemployment in the Gaza Strip. And that's making me really very sad for the future of these youths, the future of those children, how these people can really survive with such kind of a high percentage of unemployment. How? I think that this is what Australia should have to focus on. I think that Australia has its own connection in the Gaza Strip, in Israel, and in the West Bank. And I believe that the Australian can contribute very well directly to the civilian, innocent people, not to the leaders at all. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I did say at the start that you were in for a treat, and that is exactly what we got. Bassem, on behalf of AJAC, thank you so much for your presentation tonight. It was highly informative, and I think the audience is certainly better off for it. So thank you so much on behalf of everyone at AJAC. Ladies and gentlemen, tune in next week, Tuesday, the 8th of June at 7:30 p.m. with Ehud Yaari to go through all the ins and outs. That's all we have time for tonight. For those that are in Victoria, stay safe during the lockdown. To all of our friends and family elsewhere, it's a good night for now, and thank you very much.